It's got to be 7:30.
No, we got like half a minute. We got a minute. Got my clock on.
Our watch must be fast. Oh, yeah, you're right.
It's the only way I get anywhere is to have a clock that's fast. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. I want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Upper Similkameen Indian Band. A motion to accept the agenda for May 4th.
Make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Willis, seconder. Councilor
Second.
Gould. Any additions? We have one. Yeah, we have one. We have to go into camera at the end, so that'd be 11, or 12, sorry. Motion to approve the amendment. Gould, seconder. McLean, all in favor of the amendment? Thank you. All in favor of the motion? Thank you. Motion to accept the April 20th, 2020 regular meeting of council minutes be adopted.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? All in favor? So moved. Petitions and delegations. We have KPMG here to do our financial statements, and they will be on the big screen. It's all yours.
Go ahead, Brent.
Oh, I don't think you can hear us. Technical
Brent, you're on.
difficulties. I don't think you can hear us. George, can you hear us?
How come it says?
That button looks like it says unmute on it.
Unmute.
Yeah, there you go.
George, or Brent?
I'm here, yep.
Okay. Brent, you're on.
Sorry? Okay. We couldn't hear anything. Oh, yeah.
All yours, Brent.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, I'm up. Sorry, I couldn't hear anything. So thanks very much for allowing me to join the meeting tonight. Hope everyone's doing well through the current situation. I'm going to take you through the 2019 financial statements for the Town of Princeton. I want to remind you that these statements are consolidated statements, so they do include your interest in the Vermilion Forks Community Forest Corporation, as well as an inactive subsidiary 673244 BC Ltd. Walking through the statements, the first thing you'll see once you get past the management's responsibility for the statements is the auditor's report. And the auditor's report provides an unqualified or clean audit opinion on the financial statements for 2019, meaning the statements are fairly presented as attached, and we don't have any qualifications in our report. Going past the auditor's report, the actual statements themselves start at the statement of financial position, so the consolidated statement of financial position. And this shows your financial assets, your liabilities, your non-financial assets, and your accumulated surplus at the end of 2019 and also at the end of 2018. So overall, my comment would be you remain in a strong financial position. You don't have any external debt. You have net financial assets at the end of the year of $5,660,000. Looking at the individual components under your financial assets, you have about $7,075,000 of financial assets at the end of the year. Almost $4 million of that is in cash and cash equivalents, being short-term investments. So that cash position has increased by over $1 million from last year. The majority of that being a repayment or dividend from the Vermilion Forks Community Forest Corp. Looking at other assets, you do have a decrease in your accounts receivable at the end of the year over last year by about $135,000. During the year, you've got your lying land held for resale. You've got lots available for sale, and some of those lots did sell during the year, so you do see a decline in that balance from over 1.9 million to 1,755,000 at the end of the year, as you sold 5 lots during the year, and the cost of those lots sold were about 237,000. Loans receivable repaid as scheduled, and long-term investments is the investment in the Forest Corporation and 673244, and you see a decline in that long-term investment due to the cash that was repaid by the Forest Corporation during the year. So as I said, financial assets in excess of $7 million at the end of the year. Liabilities-wise, you do not have any external debt. At the end of the year, accounts payable is $565,000, pretty consistent with last year. Deferred revenue being made up of generally prepaid utilities and taxes is up slightly over last year. And the other line item there under liabilities would be your future costs to close the landfill and for post-closure care. Now that's an area of estimate that you're looking at what the future costs are going to be when you have to close the landfill, when it's filled to capacity, what the environmental legislation says you have to do in terms of care after you close it. So that number has gone up, but that is certainly an area of estimate about, and you rely on specialists to come up with, what those future costs are going to be. And part of that is driven by when you're present valuing those to today's costs, what interest rate or discount rate you use. And that discount rate changed slightly during the year, so that has increased that liability somewhat over the prior year to $772,000. But again, that's an area that does vary from year to year and from time to time, depending on what those future costs are going to be and when they're going to be incurred. So total liabilities are just over 1.4 million, meaning, as I said earlier, your net financial assets are 5,660,000. That's about 136,000 less than they were a year ago. Your non-financial assets is made up mainly of your tangible capital assets, being your roads, your buildings, equipment of the municipality. It sits at a balance of 21.3 million. During the year, you spent about 1.3 million in capital and capital projects, spread out between building improvements, paving and roads, sewer improvements, and some equipment and engineered structured. So a bit of a mix in a number of different areas. Your accumulated surplus at the end of the year has increased slightly to 27,274,000. Of that, you've got 21.3 million that is your equity in your tangible capital assets. You continue to have a fair amount of reserves, and increasing the amount of reserves you have put aside during the year. So of that accumulated surplus is also about 5.3 million in reserves, and you have about 600,000 that is unrestricted surplus at the end of the year. Then move you past the statement of financial position onto the statement of operations, the next page, which shows your revenues and your expenses and your surplus for the year, as both in terms of your budget for 2019, your actual for 2019, and your comparative 2018 actuals. So as you can see, in terms of revenue, you budgeted for just over 7.5 million in revenue, and you came in at 7,364,000, and that's up about $1 million over last year. Of that, property taxes were about 2.85 million during the year, and that's up over last year as you budgeted. User fees, some slight, in terms of sewer and water, some slight decrease in revenues there. The big increases under grants, your provincial and your federal grants that you received during the year are up over last year, and that's mostly due to increase in gas tax revenues and also some funding for wastewater treatment projects during the year as well. You've also got some increase in regional district grants over last year. That's about almost $175,000 increase there. Part of that was for the chiller and the arena. You've also got a slight decrease in sale of service and rentals, and also some increase in return on investments, and a slight decrease shown in land sales. So $7.3 million of total revenue for the year. On the expense side, a few things to note. We do see some increase in expenses overall, matching the increase in revenue. Some of that is a change in allocation from last year in terms of, you see general government going down from last year to this year, and some of that is how those administration expenses are allocated. So some of the other areas do share in those administrative costs. So economic development, for one, we see some increase there over last year in terms of wages and administration, and some of the conference and marketing done for the community. Some increase in environmental health as well. Decrease in general government, as I said. Some decrease in protective services over the prior year as well, down from $400,000 to just under $300,000. Some of that was the emergency response plan that was done in the prior year. Had some increase in recreation and culture. Some of that is in wages and benefits. Campground costs in the current year have driven up the cost in that area. Some increase in sewer utility costs as well, with some increased maintenance to bring some of the sewer reporting up to date. As I mentioned, the solid waste closure cost, that is a non-cash expense, but that increase in the liability does go through your operating expenses. Transportation is also up as well. Some increase in wages as part of that increase, and increase in how the administration transfer of some of those min costs are allocated during the year. And some slight increase in water utility as well at the end of the year. So total expenses were $7,291,000 as compared with $6,107,000 the prior year. So left you with a surplus of about $72,000. Last year that was $272,000. Before the other income, which is the allocation of income from Vermilion Forks Community Forest Corporation, which was down this year at $112,000 as compared with about $750,000 the previous year, leaving you with an overall annual surplus of $184,000 as compared with $1,022,000 surplus the previous year. A couple other things to note in the statements. We've added a subsequent event note on the impact, or just to identify to the financial statement users that subsequent to year-end, the COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, and that there could be future potential impacts on operations and revenues. Although I've talked with James about that, and most of your revenue, and looked at your revenue sources, and most of your revenues will continue. Unlike some other municipalities are more impacted by COVID-19, and will have areas of programs and services that they're just not able to generate any revenue from. Most of your revenue should generally continue, so that's a good sign for the community. And when I look at, I think the risk probably is just in, can residents and businesses pay their property taxes and utilities in a timely basis, and that's probably the biggest area moving forward. And fortunately, you're in a strong financial position to be able to, I presume, weather that storm and the unknown that comes with the current pandemic. So just want to make that comment as well about the financial statements and your financial position and COVID-19. So I'll stop there for a moment and take any questions of Mayor and Council on the 2019 financial statements.
Does anybody have any questions? No questions? Can you hear me? We have no questions at this time.
Okay. Just want to thank you for allowing me to join the meeting tonight. And James, thanks for all your assistance and your staff of getting through the audit. And Mayor and Council, thanks for the opportunity to be of service to you. And I wish everyone well. And hopefully we get through this current situation safely and everybody stays safe and healthy. So thanks very much for allowing me to join the meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Brent.
Thanks, Brent.
Stay safe.
Okay, I'll sign off. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Do we need a motion to receive that? It's later? Okay. Somewhere. Okay, we'll move on to 6, staff reports, UBCM Community Resiliency Investment Program, recommendation that council approves the resolution to support the UBCM grant application supporting staff to receive and manage grant funding under the UBCM Community Resiliency Investment Program.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Gould, seconder.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Willis, any questions?
Would Ed like to speak on it?
Would you like to? Do you want?
I
him to?
would like to, yeah, just to have you summarize it, please. I think it's a great thing.
The granting process was multifaceted, and this portion of it was we were directed to apply to, and it has to do with Fire Smart Community Program. So you may have heard various advertisements they're pushing this year, supporting towns and communities to participate. And this grant will assist in having a community coordinator and assist me in delivery of that program, get the people in the community in certain locations that are in the high risk areas to start thinking about how to minimize their wildfire risk.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? So moved, thank you.
In favor?
Thanks, George.
You can put your hand up and see.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you guys, but I caught that part.
Okay, sorry, I'll try to speak up, George,
Okay.
because he's on the phone, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought he was on the computer.
No, he's back there.
We gotta get that figured out. Okay, 6.2, proposed cannabis retail location, 255 Vermilion Avenue. Recommendation that council provide preliminary approval of the location 255 Vermilion Avenue, providing the applicant receive approval from the province for retail cannabis establishment, and that the applicant proceed with the required zoning amendment application for the location at 255 Vermilion Avenue, legally described as Lot 6, Block 25, Plan KAP 55, District Lot 706, Yale Division, Yale Div of Yale Land District, Portion N, 1/2.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Willis, seconder.
I'll second.
Councilor Gould. Questions?
I don't have anything against this. The last I remember is we were discussing locations of possible locations for cannabis sales in our community, and the last I remember was the possibility of one being over on First Nations land, one being up around the BC Green, and looking at one in the downtown area, as long as it wasn't close to schools or blah, 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 or all that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So has someone done a lot of discussion about this, and I've missed it all, or what?
Well, we did pass a zoning requirement But this is the first application that actually has materialized. This is the first person who, or the first company that has come forward looking at a location to date.
Okay,
Yeah, I can speak to
we
it.
seem to have skipped a step in my mind in terms of where we were discussing the possibilities of where they could go and where we would
Maybe,
feel most comfortable with them.
you might not have been here.
Pardon me?
I'm just wondering if, I'm just trying to remember if you were here when we did the zoning bylaw change.
Can you speak loud?
I can speak to that. Yeah, so we updated our bylaw in order to allow for the upcoming cannabis retail. It addressed, production of, growing of, and then also retail. And we proposed to council, and council adopted the fact that it was difficult to sort of assign areas within the town in advance. And so the new bylaw purposely does not identify zones, and the purpose of that was that every application then would come before council for their review. And I just want to be clear on this one. This is not an actual application. This is actually like a preliminary application. It's quite expensive for them to go through the whole process, so they're just wanting to get a feel from council. Would this be an appropriate location? Staff has reviewed everything and is bringing it forward as that this would be an appropriate location to house retail, cannabis retail.
So in this discussion that you had, was there any other areas that you had looked at, or?
No, every application will be brought before council, and what we would suggest is that we look at what every other community is looking at, and that is the proximity to schools, to parks, to playgrounds, to kids in general. As we go forward, we would also look at proximity to other retail, cannabis retail. This being our first one that's been brought forward as a source of interest, it's relatively easy. If you look at the criteria that we had just talked about, this location does fit well. So.
Okay, so at some point in time, do we discuss
Yeah.
how many of these shops we want in our community, or?
No. When we had that discussion about the bylaw and the renewing of the bylaw, there was no set amount of retail outlets that we would have. So all we determined was that every application would come before council.
Okay, I go back to the fact of we're okaying this one. So if another one comes in, we okay another one, and another one comes in and we okay another one. We just keep okaying them until no more come in, or?
Yeah, you would look at each application on its own merit, and you may not okay one. You may say that's too close to a school or too close to a park or whatever, and you may say that's not appropriate.
So this criteria that the two examples of criteria that you just described, have we set that down somewhere, or?
That's a discussion that we've had. We've seen other communities. That's the same criteria as what other communities have adopted. So.
Okay, this discussion involved council?
Some of them, yeah.
I think so.
We had a discussion about the bylaw and.
I remember when we first started.
I'm just wondering if you were away during, we haven't, because we just passed a bylaw.
Yeah, we discussed that we
We
talked
went to
about
public
this. This isn't
consultation.
okay, this isn't a go right now, right? We gotta discuss it, right?
Yeah, and there still will be an application come forward,
Yeah.
right? So.
I guess at some point in time, I would have liked to have been involved in how we because I was involved in the very beginning when we talked about what I just said, one here and one downtown and one maybe on the First Nation.
So when we passed the bylaw, we set out that every application we will look at individually. So we had a discussion around a bylaw. We sent it out for public consultation. we got feedback, and we passed a bylaw. So it took like 2 months to pass a bylaw. We've had that discussion.
I don't think you have, about what I'm talking about. Can you tell me how many you would like to see downtown?
It's open-ended. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's on a case-by-case basis based on the application. So it's gonna vary. A lot of places will disqualify themselves based on proximity to park, school. I mean, those areas will fall into place themselves. So, but what we propose that every application that comes in will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis on where they want to locate.
So all I'm getting at is if enough cases come in and we get 15 of them downtown, then that's okay.
Well,
But we don't have to okay anymore,
technically,
right? We can okay this one and then we don't have to okay anymore, right?
Do we have any guidelines about what we,
Well, I think we've discussed a little bit, and then we've decided that with our discussions and our guidelines that we've talked about, that we'll decide as they come up, I think. Like that. Yeah, we don't have to okay anymore, I don't think.
no,
It's no different, than if another liquor store wanted to come to town, or another bar, we would take it on its merit, not based on, well, we want one in this sector of town, and this section of town, and this section of town. It's based on,
they have their own rules, liquor stores.
so do cannabis. They have to go through an entire process through the province, and this is just, they're putting their toe in here. It still has to go to the province. It may or may not go through the province. Then the province will then send it out to us, and we will give approval, and then it goes back to the province, or not approval, and then it'll go back to the province, and then the province will make the final decision.
So, in
and
other words,
it's tens of thousands of dollars.
$10,000 for the application.
yeah, I'm not arguing all that. What I'm getting at is, it sounds as if what I'm talking about is gonna be handled by the province.
No, the application will be, but we, through our zoning bylaw, will decide whether or not we're going to allow one next door here and 2 doors down, or over by the school, or wherever. That's the way
And
we
we'll
set it up.
just do that one by one as they come in.
Yeah, and reality is, this may be the only one we ever see. The market's gonna dictate what
What
this
if it
market's gonna
isn't?
be able to bear. Well, with the amount of money that you have to put forward, it will,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
if I can just clarify, with the wording that we amended in bylaw 978, it was to add a permitted use. But there are currently no zoning that have that permitted use within the zoning. So then it comes back to us to determine, and I agree with you, Councillor McLean, that it would be a little easier if we had maybe a discussion down the road of what we would like to see, because if you have policies or regulations down on how many we would like to see in our community, that might be a little bit better of a guideline. I know we had discussions on that before. We just don't know how many applications we're gonna have. The regulations over the cannabis sales and stuff is done by the province, so that's out of our hand. We don't have to determine the locations within. We're just, as a group, discussing, would that be a preliminary location that we would be okay with, the sale of cannabis at this time? And then my understanding, then if Carrie might need to clarify, how, it's a currently zoned, what is the zoning on that?
It's currently zoned C2,
Okay, which is service commercial?
town center, commercial.
Okay,
So what it would do is they would still continue with the permitted uses that are in that zone. They would be site specific, and it would just add cannabis retail to
that lot.
that lot, to that property only. So it's a site specific for that legal description, for that property, to be able to have all the permitted uses in C2, including retail cannabis establishment, should council want to approve.
Okay, and then if we approve it, or propose that we're in agreement to it, and then we approve it, they go through the application process, that C2 with an additional designation remains on that lot in perpetuity, or whatever the word is, sorry, forever.
Correct.
Okay. So then, it doesn't matter if it changes back to a restaurant. You don't need to change anything again. So then, my understanding to support what your point is, there isn't any clear definition of how many we're hoping for in Princeton or how many we're willing to support in Princeton. That's each time somebody comes to put an application to the town of Princeton, we have that ability to discuss it. The province regulates how close to things. We have the ability to discuss it and determine, are we in support of that?
And I think to a certain degree, the market will determine how many
Right.
would be in town.
And we could, as a group, decide one's enough, right? Or we could decide it's great.
It's kind of a touchy thing because
It's great.
you're curtailing business in a way, and who gets the opportunity? The very first person that puts in, first come, first serve sort of thing, or we allow as many as council wishes to allow, and then stops when we get to a point where we think that's enough for our community or whatever. I would like to think that the province is going to make some of those decisions for us in terms of the same procedure they use with liquor stores.
I see it as I use the analogy of like a liquor store. The approval process, the regulations and everything are just as strict. So,
Gary has a
I
comment.
think where it could be very similar with limiting is what you see in adult entertainment. A lot of municipalities will only provide one or two. I came from Windsor. Windsor had a lot of them, and then they put a moratorium on it and wouldn't allow anymore, and that was it. So it's kind of the same thing. I mean, if you're looking at, it's perfectly within our ability to have one, if that's what you want. Like it can be done.
and it's also within our ability to set a policy. That's what we can do with motions and resolutions
Well, I guess that's
and have discussions.
all I was getting at in
Yep.
terms of, I have no problem with this application or any others that come. I think I would have liked to have had in my mind what our end result was going to look like.
And I agree.
But don't you like that, don't you
That
like
it's
the
not-
idea of being able to add another one? Say, we were like, hey, this worked out good, nobody has an issue with it, let's add another one? Or else we could say, oh, there's a bunch of issues with it, let's not have any more, right? This way we can, right, if we just said at the very start, well, we're just gonna have one, right? I just feel like it gives us,
Yeah, it gives us
an
options.
option of,
And the market will sort a lot of it out.
oh yeah, they're not lining up, I don't think.
No, I mean, we haven't, I mean, this is the closest thing to an application that's come forward
And it's
so
not an
far.
application.
It's not even an
And it's not.
application.
That wasn't on a napkin. I've had a couple of those. So this was a legitimate one that I've had. And I've vetted plenty beforehand. Like, there's been others, but they're in no position to.
And the cost to proceed for the applicants will be a determination of how many. Like, not everybody's going to be afford to open a retail location with the licensing requirements. And security requirements, yeah. And that's all regulated by the province. That's,
province has very strict
that's one thing I'm
guidelines.
grateful for is I don't know enough about it to regulate it or to set policy on it. I am glad the province is regulating it.
If I could just add too, I think by doing it this way, the town is in a far better position than boxing us into a specific area where the area may be of no interest to a retailer. Like if we would have designated the industrial park per se as the spot for cannabis, we may never have had anybody apply to that because they just don't get the visual traffic, that the other places would present. So I think all in all, the way that we've moved forward with this is very business friendly and efficient. It's definitely in my opinion, the best way to move forward with this.
And it's something we can look at again if we do determine as a group that we need to set more of a parameter, like a border or a goal, an end goal.
Any other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? So moved. George, can you hear us?
Yes, eventually I can.
Okay. I wasn't sure. 6.3, Town of Princeton Financial Statements. Recommendation that council receive and approve the 2019 financial statements as presented by KPMG.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, George, and Randy, second?
Yep.
Any questions, comments? All in favor? So moved. You in favor, George?
Yeah, sorry, I'm in favor.
That's okay. Council reports. George, do you got anything to report?
Oh, man, what do you want to know?
How are you?
How are you?
Huh?
How are you?
How am I? Getting better every day. I could give you a real quick rundown on what's happening. This goes back to my event in November, and unfortunately, for some reason, there was somebody dropped the ball, or there was a glitch in some way when it comes to follow-up, and so there was very little in the form of follow-up, and 5 months passed, and I ended up getting rushed to Kelowna Hospital a couple of weeks back with blood clots in one of my arms, and that was related to my irregular heartbeats, and so basically the goal is to get the heartbeat back to normal. I could tell you how it was. It was running at 50 to 60% of capacity in November. Probably the strongest heart in the room that you guys are in is probably running at 70%. There's no such thing as 100% apparently, according to my cardiologist. And so in the 5 months from November to last month, my heart's been running a marathon every single day, and as a result has now gone from 50 to 60% heart function down to 10% heart function. So that's what we're trying to do, is rebuild the strength of my heart. I have a number of complications that'll have to be dealt with once my heart is back on track, but I'm extremely positive that this is just a hurdle, and we're moving forward, and I'm on a pretty good program. I've got a lot of follow-up. I've got a lot of people in my corner, and things will be good. It'll be a rocky few months, but right now I'm feeling pretty good, and looking forward to getting back at it.
Good to hear. Keep it up, George.
Thank you.
Councillor McLean.
I was involved in some discussions, but the information that I had gathered verbally, I was to have sent to me, but it wasn't, and I'm presuming that you would have.
Yes.
You've discussed that, so you can cover that. It's in terms of groups from out of town coming to plant trees and that sort of thing, and the safety regulations that they're going through in order, they're quite extensive, and it's comforting to know that all the stuff that they're having to go through to make sure that nothing is being brought into the town and all that kind of thing, but I'm sure you can expand on that more. The other thing is that, as we all know, we're in tough times with this COVID-19, and as a result of that, the league that the Princeton Posse plays in is applying, apparently there's funding for groups and organizations and nonprofit societies, etc., which is what we are. As a result of that, we're sending information, all the teams are sending information that will be forwarded to the federal government in request that we be considered, that the KI be considered for funding to help us get through this process until we can start up again, and hopefully sometime in the fall. And I would request, if possible, that first of all, the general manager and myself will be putting together a letter expanding on the costs that the team is having to go through with all the problems and that sort of thing, summarizing everything that we going through. And wondered if staff could write a letter on behalf of council summarizing the importance of the team to the community in terms, and the fact that it is a community team owned by the community and that sort of thing. So if it was possible to be able to get a summary letter of the importance of the Princeton posse to the community of Princeton, and we would include that with the information that we're sending in terms of the costs and all that sort of thing that we're going through, if that was possible. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lewis.
It's been kind of slow with everything, but I did meet with the Pickleball Association. It was an interesting meeting. We all sat in the ball grandstands. Everyone was separated, and it was a pretty good way to do it. But yeah, they had a few questions and stuff, and it was a good get together. And that's my report.
Okay, Councillor Gould.
I've been,
Everywhere.
actually, I haven't even had to fill up my gas tank in my car. It's amazing. Like, everybody that
It's so
knows
cheap,
me
though,
and
you
how
got-
much gas I usually put through that little Mazda 3 for driving for hockey, I haven't even had to fill it up. It's wonderful. But I've just been quietly sitting back and trying to support the people closest to me and the people that I try and reach out to, because these are stressful times, and mental health is a pretty serious thing, and it's really hard to get that help when you need it. So, anyways, so just be kind, be patient, be kind. I love that our grocery store has, sorry, the arrows. They've done so much to protect the workers, because I've gone into that store and had friends that work there so upset, so worried. So I want to keep just reminding people, be kind, share a smile, be polite, be patient, and know that everybody is going through this right now. Like, we're all in a weird place. So anyways, deer counts. I tried to get enough people to do a deer count. It's really hard right now with the social distancing, but I have 14 that are regularly in my front yard up on by the PXA grounds. The other thing that I'm hearing about and speaking to people about is the marmot problem, and I'm hoping that's something that we can continue to address. With the deer counts, there are a lot that aren't migrating back up to the mountains, so there's quite a few that are in town. The bears are in town. Carolyn Blank is back as our BC Wild Safe coordinator, which I'm very grateful for. And we're trying to encourage people to do the right thing. Don't put your garbage out. Our bylaw's set now. I know that there's support for that too. We've proven that increasing your calls to conservation doesn't mean that we're increasing the number of bears being put down. It's more of a safety issue. The conservation needs to know the activities, like, are they out and about during the day? They need that information. So please continue to call the RAPP line. It's on our app, it's on our website, it's on the Facebook pages, it's everywhere, it's easily accessible. So just continue to be smart, because garbage is a very big attractant. Quick food for them, they won't leave if there's quick food in town. So anyways, that's that.
Thank you. Okay, as to what, just a brief summary, because it's quite the,
No kidding.
I think it's 17 pages. So what Councillor McLean was talking about there was the rules around silviculture and the tree planters camps. So they're very similar to the camps for the migrant workers and that. So it's increased hand washing stations, they have to have a, like a safety officer on site. They have to keep records and all the rest of it. I'll send the there's a link that the province has to, it's quite the extensive list, even shows you what you're supposed to do for a hand washing station. I'll send that to staff and maybe we can get that link put up on the town's website, just so people know. I know I've had some people concerned about tree planters coming into town. I've talked to Norm Druck at Weyerhaeuser, and Norm's number one concern is always safety of the community and safety of the tree planters. So Weyerhaeuser has assured me that they will be doing everything that they can to make sure that their workers are safe and that the community itself is safe, which is, I knew that's the answer I'd get from Norm, because that's how Norm is. So, other than that, I've been attending a lot of meetings. We're having a weekly regional district meeting now on Thursdays. We had on the 21st, we had a healthcare steering committee meeting. What else? They talked about the increase in the testing that's going on with the provincial changes in what or who will be tested now. We don't have a lot of extra testing going on here, but there's locations and there's a couple of media releases on. There's a location in Penticton and other areas for that. Other than that, I think, it's somewhat business as usual with a lot of the other meetings, because we're still meeting regularly. We're just talking about COVID-19 and instead of our regular business, and that's about it really. Okay, we'll move on to correspondence received and file. We have one letter from Don Johnson, 8.1, and the recommendation is that it be received and filed.
Make the motion, Mr.
Council Willis, seconder. Council McLean.
I'll second that.
Thanks,
Too slow,
George.
Joe.
I'll give it to him. Any questions about the letter? Yeah.
The only thing, Mr. Mayor, that I had was, it seems to me that we're going through some big changes in terms of trying to accommodate housing in our area, and as a result of that, we're incurring costs as a result of sewer lines and upgrading water and all that kind of thing. To me, that would be my answer back to Mrs. Johnson, is that we are far behind in terms of being able to expand, and now we're bringing it up to date, and as a result of that, you have to pay for it, so.
Yeah, we've had increased costs and everything, so, those costs have to be borne by the users, right? Do we know what percentage of payment we've received today?
As of this morning, we're about 40% of water and sewer rates.
40%. And, yeah, okay. Councilor Joe?
Just further on that though too, I think with the thought or the plan to go forward with metering, water metering, I think that will help families too. Because then you're gonna be paying, it's more accurate, it's pay per use. Right? Instead of the blanket, like a single family dwelling, one person living in it's paying the same as a family of 5.
Any further discussion? All in favor? So moved. Correspondence action requested, child find British Columbia proclamation for National Missing Children Month and Missing Children's Day, where recommendation is whereas Child Find British Columbia, a provincial member of Child Find Canada, is a non-profit registered charitable organization incorporated in 1984, and whereas the mandate of Child Find British Columbia is to educate children and adults about abduction prevention, to promote the awareness of the problem of missing children, and to assist in the location of missing children, and whereas Child Find has recognized green as the color of hope, which symbolizes light in the darkness for all missing children, and whereas Child Find's annual Green Ribbon of Hope campaign will be held in the month of May, and May 25th as National Missing Children's Day, and Therefore, be it resolved that I, Spencer Coyne, Mayor of Princeton, Mayor of the Town of Princeton, do hereby proclaim May as Child Finds Green Ribbon of Hope Month and May 25th as National Missing Children's Day. I urge our citizens to wear a green ribbon as a symbol of hope and or for the recovery of all missing children and remain vigilant in our common desire to protect the nature of the young of our province. Motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Gould, seconder.
I'll second that.
Councilor Willis. Questions? All in favor? So moved. Number 10, bylaws and resolutions. 2020 tax rate, recommendation that the tax rates bylaw number 986, 2020 be adopted. Will make that motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Willis, seconder.
What about Counselor Elliott?
He's sleeping.
He's listening. You're listening, right?
Yep, I'm here. I'll second that if you need a seconder.
I'll
I'm
give
sorry,
it to you. I'll give it
don't-
to you, Councilor Elliott. All in favor?
Question?
Oh, question, sorry. That already did that part. Go ahead.
So I didn't.
I'm in favor.
I didn't clearly understand what I was able to do last council meeting. There was only 2 councillors here and the mayor. And I wasn't sure if I make the motion, was I able to speak on it. So today I would like to take the opportunity just to speak my piece. So this was a recommendation of staff to make a change of our tax due date from what I believe was July 31st or to July 2nd. With that, I have a concern in that we're bumping it up a month, but then we had further discussions on that, and my fear on that was a little bit alleviated because we're also reducing the penalty from 10% to just 1% on if they're not paid in full by July 2nd.
Yeah.
And then with a further 9% possibly by the end of September.
Correct. So staff really has a kind of a balancing act with our cash flow situation this year. Classes 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which would include major and light industry. So that would include anything in the industrial park, Warehouser, Copper Mountain Mine, all businesses in town. Their deadline for property taxes have all been extended to October the 1st by the province. I cannot change that. Classes 1 and 2, germane to our town, also 3 and 9. We don't have any 3 or 9 properties in the town of Princeton, but residences and utilities are, have been moved up 30 days. What that does is that triggers anyone who pays their mortgages through any financial institutions. That triggers their payment for the 2nd instead of the 31st, which improves our cash flow, pushes it back 30 days. It also allows us a little bit of an opportunity to see what our cash flow is going to look like on July 2nd. Our window for our capital plan is quite narrow at July 31st, especially if a lot of people take advantage of the 1% tax penalty and push that all the way to October. If we do have the funding that comes in on the 2nd of July, we have a good chance of being able to proceed with our planned paving schedules, our planned deployment of park improvements, etc., our entire capital plan at this point. Whereas giving our chance for our major employers in town to have that deferral until October the 1st.
Thank you. And then by moving it to July 2nd, you also said that puts it in line in your report, that it puts it in line with our costs going out as well.
Correct, yes. So regardless of what we receive, the regional district, the BC Assessment Authority, and the Municipal Finance Authority are all due on August 1st by statute. So we have to pay it by then. The 31st of July makes it very tight to make that August 1st deadline if we have a cash flow issue on that point. It may be out of an abundance of caution, but that 30 days, if we had everyone take advantage of that 1% deferral opportunity, would give us time to approach a municipal finance authority, to approach our local financial institution for possibly a bridge loan to be able to pay those authorities by August 1st as required by statute.
Are most municipalities on the second?
Well, everyone who's not in a municipality is July 2nd.
That's not what?
By the province. So anyone in the regional district
Oh,
must pay their property tax by July 2nd. But most other municipalities, yes, are July 2nd. There's only a handful that are usually after July 2nd. Now, there are more municipalities this year that are pushing it later in the year, fall and winter, when they have the opportunity. We chose to, as staff, chose to propose to council that we would have a very minor penalty. And an average house, our average tax burden this year is about $1,200. It represents a $12 penalty if people choose not to pay on July 2nd. We chose to have a very small penalty up front and a larger penalty later to encourage those who could pay to be able to support their community.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
In my mind, I was a little hesitant at first, but after thinking about it, I think this is a coronavirus beneficial movement. If you have people, why we moved it later in the past was it gave a lot of businesses the summertime, the July business to be able to afford it and that, which you're losing that 1 month in this case. However, 1% of a business could be like $50 or $60 kind of a thing, and you have the benefit all the way till September 30th. Hopefully, you're not going to go all that way, but you definitely have your July and August revenue coming in to make it a lot more affordable. I think in the long run, it's something that's, you could almost call it a pro-positive move for coronavirus as far as I'm concerned.
I do have one more comment. Sorry. That due date, July 2nd as well, is also for homeowner grant, correct?
Correct, yes.
So then it would be recommended that if people can't make their payment, but still claim your homeowner grant by that date.
Yes,
So that it's
absolutely,
reduced.
yes.
Sorry.
That's free to do, and it's automatically $770, or to minimize your payment down to $350 or $100 or $1045, depending on your current situation.
And then the penalty would only be on the balance.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I also agree. At first I was hesitant. I was like, oh, we're putting more pressure. It's asking for it a month early, but then you made the point of $1,200 is 1%, or
$12.
$12.
That's why we got them, right?
That's what, yeah. And it does make me feel a bit better. I just, because of the fact with coronavirus and everybody struggling, there's people that are not working. I'm more confident on it, but I wanted to bring it to the table to speak.
Anything else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? So moved. 10.2, Water Regulations Bylaw number 987-2020. Recommendation that the Water Regulations Bylaw number 987-2020 be adopted.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
So ruled. Seconder?
Give it a second.
Second.
Any questions on this? All in favor? Seeing no questions, and approved. We do have one addition on number 12, and that's a motion to close.
Sorry, can I add a new business?
Sure.
I'd like, just in regards to Councillor McLean's council report, he was requesting a letter from the town in support of the posse for their application. I'd like to make a motion that we write that letter.
I'll second that.
Or George?
Maybe Councillor Elliott.
Councilor Elliott, do you want to second that?
I totally missed what's going on there.
Okay. Councilor Willis can second it. All in all in favor?
Do you want to
It's
clarify?
a letter to support the posse. I keep yelling at you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Second, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All in favor? So moved. Okay, now we'll close. Motion to close pursuant to section 90.1 of the community charter to deal with land issues.
Make that motion.
Counselor Gould, seconder, Counselor McLean. All in favor? So moved. We're now going into close. But before, may the 4th be with you.
Done. Put it on now.
I'm not putting it on now. I can do that.